presented by Harper Volkswagen. Welcome to Live Ball with
Tennessee closes out the month of January with a home date against Auburn. What will it mean for the Volunteers to close out the month of January with their last 3 games ending all in W's? And for the Lady Vols, they're getting ready to go on the road to face the best team in women's basketball and the UConn Huskies. We're diving right in. This is Live Ball.
Welcome to Live Ball with Paige Dower, presented by Harper Volkswagen.
Welcome into Live Ball. Paige Dower here alongside VFL Jerron Mayman, presented by Harper Auto Square. Today we're in Harper Audi, and it's where your favorite coaches and players buy their cars. Jerron, it has been a fun end of the month for Tennessee. 2 road wins against Alabama and Georgia. What has been your most favorite part about these last couple of games for Tennessee?
Well, I've been seeing this team grow up down the stretch. They've been able to come up with some pretty good wins. Obviously, they've had some bumps in the roads, but it's been pretty interesting to see them find the consistency and continuity in the rotation that they have. Yeah,
and now they're getting ready for a massive rivalry game against the Auburn Tigers. You know their head coach quite well, being former teammates with Stephen Pearl, and this certainly is one that has all of the intensity as we get ready to turn our attention to the series history. It has a lot of stakes heading into this matchup. Of course, Tennessee wants to win its last 3 games. Auburn has a little bit of momentum behind them, winning their last 4 games. What can a win like this against Auburn do for Tennessee to maybe build its momentum and maybe keep things rolling?
Yeah, when you see the SEC and you watch the way everything transitions, or the trends rather, the last 6 weeks of the season is usually what makes the separation. The wins you're able to garner in the last maybe 3 to 5 games that SEC play leading into SEC tournament, that kind of sets the foundation of what you expect to come from a team. And like I said, I like what I see.
And of course, when you transferred into Tennessee from Marquette, you know, they'd always said that you were this strong physical and presence inside. What are you enjoying about what JP Estrella is showing with his physicality inside?
Well, it's the consistency. And I think when you watch what he did in this last game, obviously the 2 buckets that he got in overtime.
Yeah.
We were struggling to score up until that point, and then he got us 2 really consistent buckets. And I think that just shows we need to have some of the bigs in the game and be consistent in our, I'll say, rotations, or try to keep the big lineup, because when you look at the rebounding margin and what happened and the discrepancy in that, we got, I will say, about 24 or 26 points off of our offensive rebounders. Yeah. That's very impressive. That's going to be hard for another team to keep up with.
Yeah, especially when you can compare that or couple that with what Felix Okpara has shown, the physicality of Jalen Carey. I mean, Tennessee is finding multiple ways to get pretty elite tandems inside, and I think they're really going to need that against this Auburn team. When we turn our attention to this series history, I mean, it's been one that's been intense. Tennessee, I think, has won the last 4. They've been at home. They're 4-6 in the last 10 meetings, but for most part, these are 2 very different looking teams from a year prior. What stands out to you maybe most about this rivalry and kind of those things that always end up showing up in this matchup?
Yeah, I think it kind of going to go back to coaching and the small things. I think when you look at 2 teams that are probably pretty evenly matched in talent, it's going to go back down to schemes. What can we accomplish with the guys that we have versus the guys that they have? And I think when we look at our lineup, I like having the big lineup in there, having Amen at the 3, and then doing what we're doing from the guard position as far as rotating good guards in when they're exhausted. And then I think we find a lot of value in guys knowing that they're going to play down the stretch, and they, like I said, they lean into that confidence of, you know, watching a couple guys, and their names are eluding me right now, but specifically, when I watched that game back, there was confident building moments in that game where guys made shots, and I feel like they'll be able to revert back to that feeling in other games moving forward.
What have you noticed that you talk about confidence and maybe it's late game composure too? These last couple of games have really kind of come down to the wire a little bit, but it seems even through mistakes, they've maintained their composure. Is that something that typically happens around this time of season with the young or let's call it a new team?
Well, you know, the ebbs and flow and confidence are going to happen just throughout the game because
Mhm.
sometimes your psyche is going to play tricks on you, and you're going to think that you're supposed to be playing better than what you actually are, right? Or what you're capable of. But sometimes your game just doesn't flow the way that you think it should at certain moments, and you have to rely on other things. And that's why coaching is so important. And so having a coach like Rick Barnes that you can lean on and trying to trust his words, and he's going to instill that confidence, even if those players kind of find themselves wavering. But that's why you see a player like Bishop Boswell doing
Sure.
what he's doing at the level he's doing now, and I see the confidence kind of just steaming off of him.
Yeah, and in this matchup between the Vols and the Tigers, it's kind of interesting now that their head coach, obviously Bruce Pearl was the last head coach. He'd been here at Tennessee, obviously when you were here, and then your former teammate and Stephen Pearl, now the head coach for the Auburn Tigers. Do you have any extra like insight into this game? Like, is it interesting now having this matchup? Your former teammate being the head coach for Auburn Tigers. Is that interesting for you? Is it weird?
Oh, well, I think it's very unique. I mean, I
Yeah.
kind of understood how the lineage would go.
Sure.
And obviously you can see the writing was kind of on the wall. And so for Steven, I'm pretty sure he's just excited to be back in Knoxville. And, I'm pretty sure he wants to get a win. But
Yeah.
I think, we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen.
And looking at maybe some of the conversation online too, it seems that it's maybe more so for Auburn. If they win this game, then they're legit. But I think if Tennessee wins this game, what I'm seeing is it kind of just affirms what everyone believes that this team can be. Obviously, they're kind of on the outside looking in for the top 25. They got the most votes for the unranked teams to be a ranked team. How much does a win against Auburn maybe get them back inside that conversation, help reshape their postseason outlook?
I think it's just going to keep adding to the momentum of the train. I think you have to focus on one game at a time. I think being in the rankings is awesome, but I think winning games is more important. If you can find a way to get in that flow state as not even just an individual player, but as a team, like offensive, defensively. And I think what I'm starting to see now is the team trying to find ways to eliminate bad possessions. Like
Sure.
sometimes down the floor, if we don't get a shot up or the shot clock violation or just something that just throws us out of whack, it kind of disrupts the flow of what we're trying to do, and it takes us more time to get back into that flow. So the more we can have empty possessions, or the less we can have empty possessions, should I say, the better for us.
And it's interesting too thinking about this matchup because it's now inside Food City Center. Tennessee is 10-1 at home. Their one loss came to Kentucky. So how much do you think this team is motivated just to right the wrong of being a dominant team at home?
Well, I think as a home team, you always want to take care of home field
Yes.
advantage. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But then again, you got to play with an extra chip on your shoulder because, like I said, as the season winds down, you only get so many more opportunities to play in front of your own fans. And I think the value or the love that you can show is just by playing hard and getting the win.
Yeah. For Tennessee, what have you noticed? Maybe these last couple of games too. You talk about empty possessions, taking care of the ball, execution late. Does that contribute to maybe Tennessee's biggest hurdle? Because when you compare that to Auburn, I mean, they're coming off a game where they kind of blew Florida out of the water. No one really expected that. And then against Texas, they really had to rally in that game. So while Tennessee maybe is that 6-point favorite or 7-point favorite, it has all the makings to be a game that does come down to the final moments or possessions of regulation.
Yeah, it's a late night game, and so the energy is always higher on late night games. I think
Yes.
we're gonna have some really good um, atmosphere.
Okay.
Hopefully, a lot of fans come out and they support. But I think most importantly, if we can dominate early, and I think that's really what I want to kind of hang our hat on. Really trying to set the tone, and that's kind of what I've been speaking on pretty much this whole season. It's like if we can set the tone early, it kind of sets apart for what other teams, kind of like the shock factor of what we saw with Auburn and Florida.
Sure.
Like Auburn came out and they punched them in the mouth. Florida never got back up from that.
No.
And I think the value of that is most of the time teams are unassuming, right? You never know what it's going to feel like until you're in front of that player or that team, or you're in that arena and you're like, wow, this is actually the moment that I actually thought about, and it's here, but it's not playing out how I thought it would be.
Yeah, I love that point, John. And I maybe want to go back to the days where like you were that active player and what your mindset was, because a lot of what Nate Ament or Jacoby Gillespie have talked about this season is in these games, let's say Kentucky, it gets a little close because they take their foot off the gas. They get a little comfortable, they have a lead, but the other team wants to win just as bad. We saw that against Georgia.
Yeah.
They started out real nice. They set the tone early, but they allowed Georgia to kind of crawl back in.
Chip away.
How do you prevent that from happening against a very motivated Auburn team?
I think it's just about trying to be present, trying to be as present as possible in the moment, because sometimes you can overthink the moment, and you're not really you're moving on autopilot, and you're like, hey, I feel a step slow, but you feel fine, but you just can't shake it off, and sometimes it feels surreal. I remember a game when we played Florida at home. I had just got some unfortunate news, and it was really bothering me. It was on my mind right before tip-off. In the whole game, I could not shake it. And it was just, and I wasn't thinking about it, but my body, like my nervous system, obviously felt that information that I received. And it was just very hard for me to overcome. And, I didn't play that well that game. And so sometimes it's just that, like, there can be outstanding, circumstances or external circumstances that may prevent certain teams from playing at the level that they're capable of.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, too. And I think it highlights, a lot of things, whether we talk about the Lady Vols later in the show or even Tennessee, like mental toughness is more than just flushing the last play, right? Like these are more than just athletes. They are student athletes, kind of just as I was back in school, just being a normal college student. So that's a great point. And I think a lot of that contributes to our next segment that's coming up, where we talk about some key moments that's contributing to Tennessee's success and something that they certainly want to replicate against a very motivated Auburn Tigers team. We'll talk a little bit more about that right on the other side of this break.
See it behind your eyes. I'm already there. Calling me
You're watching Live Ball with Paige Dower and Jerome Mayman.
Always wanted a perfect smile. Today's Smile Express is going to help me to hopefully get a perfect smile.
With the help of Smile Express, I can actually get my perfect smile within 20 weeks. Not to mention how the staff is so friendly and helpful. Here they were taking a couple pictures just to do a before and after once we're done with the process. I honestly thought it was so cool how you could actually see my teeth 3D printed on the screen. And I'll show you guys how they're expected to look once the treatment is done. I am so happy and excited to share this with you guys because Smile Express is about to give me a straight smile.
Welcome to Live Ball with Paige Dower, presented by Harper Volkswagen.
Welcome back into Live Ball, talking key moments here with VFL Jerome Mayman as they get ready to take on the Auburn Tigers, which is probably the best way to close out the month of January, getting ready to turn the attention to the second half of SEC play. And for Tennessee, going 3-0 in these last three games, I think certainly builds the case to get them back inside the top 25. Honestly, I don't even think they should have been out of the top 25, maybe keep them at 25, and certainly helps to reshape the ceiling for what their postseason outlook should be. John, we can start with you getting ready for this Auburn game. What are some moments that you look back to throughout the season, maybe here even in the final four games, because I think Tennessee flipped a switch really against the Florida Gators, and I think that was kind of like that wake-up call, similarly to how it was last year. When you look at this year, what are some moments that's contributing to their success that you hope re-arises and comes back against Auburn tomorrow night?
Well, some of the early victories that we had in the seasons against some of those top-ranked teams, the way we looked against, Florida, that kind of, you need some of those games that kind of just make you realize you're not as good as you think you are, right? You have to continue to show up every day, put the work in, watch the film, get better, find your 1%, and try to apply it in real time. And I think when we have those up and down moments, it allows us to steady out towards the end of the season. That's what I'm really hoping to look for with this volunteer team, because when you think about the SEC, I don't see anyone who's head and shoulders above anyone else, right? I think we're all in similar tiers, but it's just what team shows up, right? And I think if if you come out and you play Tennessee basketball, I think it's really hard to beat us.
Yeah, it was interesting. It kind of reminds me, like, not to go on a tangent, but John Fulkerson, when he joined us last week, who obviously played in Rick Barnes' system, being a post player for the Volunteers, he mentioned that one-on-one time with Rick Barnes is, like, incredibly invaluable. And we talked about JP Estrella a moment ago, and I think where he's been able to flip the switch is that one-on-one time that he's had with Rick Barnes. You know, he tells him, like, I want you to be a little bit more nasty. They're like, I want you to be a little bit more like Eurosh, be that physical guy. What kind of one-on-one time maybe did you have, I think, with Coach Pearl, or just back at your time, that allowed you to maybe believe that you were as good as you wanted to be, or that you could rise to the occasion?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is formed obviously in the recruiting process and the off season. But then again, you have guys, transferring in and so on and so forth. But then you get to a point where you have the ability to sit down with a coach and really pick their brain. But then again, most guys, believe it or not, they don't initiate that. And so if the coach doesn't initiate it, most players won't. It's just because sometimes there's an intimidation factor, and you think coach is too busy, but technically he's there for you. So you should utilize him to the umpteenth degree. And that's what I would always encourage most players. If you have a coach that's seen it all, kind of done it all, and been around for a while, I would go ask him just about life. And go ask him some of the things that you can probably take from him and actually slingshot yourself forward, because that's what life is about. It's about learning from other people and not having to actually go through everything that someone else went through to get to where you're actually supposed to be, as far as for your purpose.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think even talking about confidence, and obviously you being the elite rebounder that you were at Tennessee, I think both of those components is something we'll see against Auburn, because they're pretty efficient from the field. I know the last couple of games we've been talking about the three-point defense and how Alabama and Georgia and Kentucky, they like to get out in transition. They play really fast, and there's some flashes of that in Auburn. But I think for them, they like to attack the paint. They like to take those mid-range shots. What kind of pressure is on, like, the post players for Tennessee, like a Dwayne Brown, who's still kind of evolving in his role? What responsibility do they have in this game to help give Tennessee success?
Well, it's going to come a lot on the urgency of both parties, the guards and the bigs, because I think when you have good guard play on the opposite side, it puts a lot of pressure on, the bigs who have to stop the ball from getting downhill, or, being penetrated to be able to find the open man on the other side, because it causes people to have to rotate and or switch. And then you put yourself at a disadvantage by a guard on the big or a big on a guard. And it just doesn't bode well, especially depending on what the schemes or what you're trying to exploit. And so a lot of it was, if you have urgency in the guards, the bigs' jobs are easier.
Oh, okay.
Right? But if the bigs are not as, let's say, on time, because you have to be in the right place at the right time to stop the ball, especially with a good guard. And an SEC guard, you have to expect that they can do multiple things. Like, you're not just going to drive one way and he's going to pick the ball up. No, he's going to change directions. And I think that's one of the hardest things to guard as a big, is the ability for a guard to be able to shift directions fast. And the big has to be able to make a decision. Do I stay with the ball or do I stay with my man?
Yes.
And that's the dilemma.
And I think that showed up a little bit against the Georgia game. I think there were a couple of times that the bigs were maybe put in a blender a little bit, especially in the paint. I remember a couple of plays, it's Felix and Bishop kind of running into each other. How do you adjust from that? I know you talk about timing, but what can they work on in practice when a lot of the game will be kind of crowded, a lot of traffic to go through, and I'm sure a lot of switching happening too?
Yeah, it boils down to what most people don't want to do, not only in sports but in life, is communicate. It's early and often. You have to communicate, and I think that's one of the things that sets good teams and great teams apart, is the ability not only for the bigs to communicate at a high level, because they see everything, technically they're the back line, but for the guards to communicate everything early as well, because the urgency starts with the ball, right? And if the guard has no urgency in his body language and he's not being able to dictate the what he's seeing, because sometimes guards will stay quiet the whole game and they put all the pressure on the bigs to talk, which it's not wrong, but it's not right either.
I heard it here first. And I guess maybe too, that's probably why you love home SEC games, because if you're relying on communication, you want the fans to be involved when you're on defense, so that the opponent doesn't have time to really get things set,
Yeah. Well, the louder things get, people start to get frantic, right? And it's like, it creates a jolt to the nervous system. So if you're talking, it may put the defender or the offensive person more in a confused state, like, there's a lot happening right now.
Sure.
And he may not know what his next action is.
Yeah, and I want to keep it on the bigs and post players too, because when I look at one of my key moments this season, I think a couple of times we put the squeeze on JP Estrella, and I would say this last 2 games, he certainly has risen to the occasion. I know he's been adamant that he's felt fine from being banged up earlier in the year with his knee and ankle and coming off the foot surgery. I mean, he has had some tough breaks this season. But hearing Coach Barnes talk about him following the Georgia win highlights just how much JP Estrella could reshape the ceiling for this team should he continue to progress the way he has.
He loves to play. With these games, you should have heard him in the huddle right before we're getting ready to start overtime. You could tell he's loving it. Like, let's go, let's play all night, and that's a great thing about him. And he's just getting started too.
At the end there, Rick Barnes says that he believes JP Estrella is just getting started. What did you see in that Georgia game that tells you maybe it's just the tip of the iceberg on what he could provide for this team this season?
I think when you think bigs, sometimes you think scorers. I think JP Estrella is like a jack of all trades. Like, he does a lot of things on the floor, and I think if he can continue to lean into the confidence from game after game, because sometimes when you come from injury, it doesn't really matter who the opponent is, because you're probably in your head more than the guy is that you're playing against. And sometimes with injuries, you just don't feel as comfortable or as confident that you could do the things that you once could do at that level. Obviously, I've suffered, certain injuries as well. And I felt like I could never get back to a certain level to a degree. And it definitely hindered me moving forward.
Because when I was talking to Folky last week, I would say, it looked like, for the most part, JP looked like he was in the right spot. He just couldn't come down with the ball. And that's probably the most frustrating thing when you've made all that effort to get in the right spot and then it gets knocked out, or you just weren't strong enough in that moment. How frustrating, obviously having those experiences, what is that small detail or difference from a guy getting the board or it just going the other way?
A lot of that's just mentality. Because,
okay.
I would say 10% of it is just being where you need to be. 90% is just doing the things you need to do, and that's being strong with the ball, because how many basketballs are on the floor at one time?
I think just one.
It's one. And so if that's the most important thing on the floor, you have to care for it with that kind of emphasis. And I think sometimes guys get very lackadaisical and they think the ball isn't as important as it actually is, but a game can be decided by 1 or 2 bad possessions and the ball game's over. And I think that's why sometimes when you have the ability or opportunity to get a rebound and secure the rebound, you must do so.
And you mentioned rebounding earlier, and I certainly think that that's going to be a key to this game as well. Auburn, as I was just looking there, they have about 37 rebounds a game. Tennessee has 43. If JP can build on what he did yesterday or a couple days ago against Georgia, I think that changes this team, because they've been kind of hot and cold with their efficiency, whether it's those mid-range or the three-pointers. So you need somebody like a JP to clean up those misses, whether it's a putback or just getting the rebound. How much of a key do you think that will end up being in this game, whether offensively or defensive rebounds?
I think it's going to be very vital, because when you think about the way we play, if we can get offensive rebounds, we have a better chance of scoring.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the initial shot may not be there, and we may have to, revert to, the end of a shot clock possession. But then again, if we have an ability to secure a rebound and get an extra possession, that bodes more well in our favor. And then eliminating rebounds, right? If you can limit the other team's possessions, they get one shot and one shot only. That's a hard bargain, and that's what we used to always try to focus on. Get 3 consecutive stops. And obviously, they only get one shot. Every time we would reset that meter, 3 stops. How many 3 stops can we stack? That was the vision.
Yeah, I think the Lady Balls, I called them kills or something if you get 3 stops
I
in a
love
row.
that.
So,
I love that.
Get a couple kills in this game, and then I think that'll turn things around. Even looking at teams in the top 25, it's Houston, Florida, and Duke, and they all have at least one guy who averages 9.9 rebounds or more per game. Tennessee certainly has the size to be able to do that. It would be nice if they could get Felix and JP to do it. We'll take one, and we'll turn our attention to the squeeze right after this break.
See it behind your eyes.
always wanted a perfect smile. Today's Smile Express is going to help me to hopefully get a perfect smile.
With the help of Smile Express, I can actually get my perfect smile within 20 weeks. Lots of mention how the staff is so friendly and helpful. Here they were taking a couple pictures just to do a before and after once we're done with the process. I honestly thought it was so cool how you could actually see my teeth 3D printed on the screen, and I'll show you guys how they're expected to look once the treatment is done. I am so happy and excited to share this with you guys because Smile Express is about to give me a straight smile.
You're watching Live Ball with Paige Dower and Jerome Naiman. Presented by Harper Audi.
Welcome back into Live Ball. Paige Dower here alongside VFL Jerome Naiman, getting ready. Big rivalry game against the Auburn Tigers, which interestingly, you know, your former teammates with Stephen Pearl, who's now the head coach of the Auburn Tigers. Have you talked at all since then?
Well, I've spoken to Stephen sparingly.
Sparingly. You gonna send anything this week like go Vols?
No, pride comes before the fall.
That's
So.
true. Yes. Okay. So we'll say that after hopefully Tennessee wins and go 3-0 to close out the month of January. When we look at this segment, obviously it's all about the squeeze. Who has the pressure to rise to the occasion in this matchup to help deliver Tennessee a win? John, we can start with you and kind of what you're looking towards, either player, coach, or position in this matchup that could give Tennessee a 3-0 end to January to propel them into the month of February.
Yeah. I thought about it, and I wanted to say a specific player, but I think the whole team has pressure on them.
Okay.
From the coaching staff all the way down to the managers. I think it's important that everyone shows up and they're 2 feet in, because sometimes you can have people that believe wholeheartedly that no matter who shows up, we're going to get the victory. But then again, you have some people that are just a little bit more pessimistic in their nature, and they just don't know, right? They're uncertain. And I think a lot of times, me being on multiple teams on the player side and the coach's side, you can kind of see some of that stuff seep through just through small comments or through body language. And believe it or not, body language speaks volumes.
Yeah, and you certainly want that when you're considering that Auburn has won their last 4. Of course, one of those coming against the Florida Gators, their last one a rally against Texas, which Tennessee split those 2 games, getting a win over Texas, but not so lucky in Gainesville against the Florida Gators. So what is it about a team that it maybe takes a minute for them to all get on the same page at the same time? Because I'm always reminded of this quote from Josh Heupel a couple of seasons ago now at this point, but he's like, all 11 of us can't take our turns being off. How hard is it to not allow that to happen? Because it might be like, oh, Jacoby was on for 6 games straight, and now he's off, but Felix is on. And what is that challenge of getting everybody on the same page at the same time?
Oh, well, it's a huge task, because you got to think there's so much you have to manage, and there's so many things that have to go right, let alone what internally is happening with these players, because some players are having an awakening like, hey, I need to do more. Hey, I'm not doing enough. Hey, I'm finally arrived. Like, there's a lot of different feelings that I think these players are maybe going through throughout the course of a season, and trying to keep them level-headed on the main goal, the main task. And sometimes it's not just to win a ball game. It's to have a successful season in whatever they determined earlier in the year that we probably are not privy to. I'm pretty sure there's an internal goal that they're chasing. But I think if they can all have that one goal, like the one band, one sound kind of mindset, it allows you to be selfless in nature. And no matter what the stat sheet says, you're confident that the next guy standing next to your left or right can get the job done just as you would.
Yeah, because when you look at the game against Texas and Auburn took advantage when Texas wasn't disciplined, when they weren't focused. That's been an Achilles heel to this Tennessee team a couple of times. I'm going back and looking at the box score. Auburn had 34 first half points. They had 54 second half points. Of course, Keyshawn Hall is a key reason why Auburn's been able to have success specifically from the floor. So when you realize that that's kind of the caliber of team that's coming in here, and it might exploit some areas where you've been weak, does that get you extra focused, extra motivated, not wanting to be exposed in ways that you've kind of been weak this season?
Well, I think hopefully you've addressed some of this stuff internally, and then obviously with externally with some of your peers that may have said, how can I help you be better? Because obviously we're not blind. If you have weak spots, we know.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that can be exploited, the coaching staff has already picked up on it. Hopefully, your coaching staff included.
Yeah.
And you try to mask those things, or you try to do what you do well, and we move on, and we just live with the result. I think a lot of times you find players who may struggle, and they are, I say for a lack of better words, delusional that they're not weak in those areas,
Sure.
and that causes more harm than good.
Yeah. And it maybe kind of gets to my squeeze too, because it's all about taking care of the ball and late game execution. So composure, where Rick Barnes has complimented the team the last couple of games, will certainly be a premium here against Auburn, because in these late game situations, Tennessee continues to turn the ball over. I'm going back and looking at their turnover numbers, and their last 3 games is 12, 10, 12. And honestly, it could have been single digits had they taken care of the ball in the final 4 minutes. Auburn, they had 18 points off turnovers against Texas. And for the most part, Tennessee doesn't get damaged that bad unless it's Kentucky and it's a trio of pick sixes. But this was, the Jacoby Gillespie squeeze that I have, where it's kind of all about him taking care of the ball late in these games.
I mean, I still turned it over at the end, but I think just we got stops too, so it kind of made up for the mistakes we made, and we also was making our free throws. So.
And that's certainly a storyline we don't want to hear by the end of the game is, yeah, I still turned the ball over. And then we got stops, and I guess we made our free throws. So when you're looking at this, is this going to be a game that really comes down to the final possessions? It's all about late game execution. And if Tennessee can do that, I think it really does confirm that they have turned a corner.
Yeah, I actually like these games, especially when they're against opponents like somebody you may see down the road, maybe in an SEC matchup or even in an attorney matchup at some level. It gives you more confidence because you need to figure out what is the fabric of this team when we have one possession. We have to get a stop. We're up 1. We're down 1.
Yeah.
What do they do when they're faced with the moment? Do we come together or do we fall apart?
Yeah, and I think the pressure for the most part is on Jacoby Gillespie, and unfortunately it's because you're in that point guard position. You're the quarterback for this team. You need to make sure that you have the right vision. You're going through your read so that the ball's not intercepted or simply just doesn't get knocked out because you kick the ball on a dribble. So I think that's where they'll maybe get exploited, and for the most part, I think if they can have that confidence, have that focus that you mentioned, and can take care of the ball, then I think this is a team that can have success in March.
Well, I'm an optimistic guy, and I'm looking forward to traveling some places. My birthday's in March, so hopefully we're going some places.
Yeah, hopefully.
And
hopefully
we'll be
it's
doing
some
the
good
show there.
wins.
We're doing live there.
Live on location. Let's do it. All right, John, I really appreciate the time.
Yes.
Of course, you're taking Tennessee. When it comes down to it, what will be the defining factor for Tennessee, you think?
I would say the ability to be able to get stops early, the ability to build confidence.
But you do want them to communicate. So.
That is true at a very, very high level. But most importantly, to be able to show that they are the same team that showed up last game and the game before, and being able to continue to stack wins.
Yeah, I love it. You're obviously still in Knoxville doing some good work here. Where can people find you who might want to connect with you?
Yeah, you can always reach out to me on any of my socials, just my first and my last name, or if you see me in person, always feel free to stop and have a conversation. I'm always looking to connect with good people, especially those who are passionate about life and VFLs.
Awesome. John, I really appreciate it. Will you be at the game on Saturday?
I will be in attendance.
All right. I love it. When we come back, we're talking all things Lady Vols as they get ready to take on the best team in women's basketball and the UConn Huskies. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
See it behind your eyes. I'm already there. Calling me
You're watching Live Ball with Paige Dower and Jerome Mayman. Presented by Harper Audi.
The Lady Volunteers get ready to face their toughest challenge of the season when they go on the road to take on the University of Connecticut and the UConn Huskies. They are the only undefeated team in women's basketball. They are the top-ranked Huskies, and this is a historic rivalry that they're getting ready to face. And it's coming on the heels of a disappointing loss for number 15 Tennessee as they dropped a game against Mississippi State last night where they were favored by double digits. They end up losing by double digits. Part of that had to come down to lack of effort or consistent effort, lack of offensive execution, and then just turning the ball over a little too much. But for Tennessee to stay in the win column after snapping a 4-game losing streak to the UConn Huskies, they might have to replicate some good things that they did last season. And it goes to this play right here. Samara Spencer, who is just driving through traffic. She gets the bucket here, and then it gets right back on defense. But this is where Tennessee's press is so effective. She gets right into the action, forces the steal, gets the scoop and score, and the Lady Ball fans and bench are erupting. You see LPFLs like Tamari Key and Jordan Horston cheering as well. And they'll need that on the road against UConn. And that's where we bring in Emily Adams. She is a beat writer for the UConn women's basketball team for the Hartford Herald, I believe. And Emily has spent so many years covering the UConn Huskies. And Emily, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you had spent some time in Knoxville, so you're kind of seeing a little bit of both sides of this rivalry. When they get ready for this game on Sunday, what has you most excited about this game? What's so historic about this rivalry, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think here in Connecticut, a lot of people still, think about Tennessee as the big rival. This matchup still means a lot to the fans here. Obviously, it's a little different than it was back in the day, but I think for the folks that have been around for a long time, this is always a game that they'll have circled. The XL Center tomorrow, or the People's Bank Arena, it's called now, should be just about sold out. I'd be surprised if it's not. And yeah, it's everybody gets up for this game. And the players have a reason to get up this year too, now with a little bit of a revenge game coming back off of the loss last year.
We're joined by Emily Adams with the Hartford Courant. Emily, when we look at what UConn's been able to do this season, we mentioned it a moment ago, they are the only undefeated team in women's basketball, top-ranked UConn Huskies. What have they done so well this season that's allowed them to hold on to that position and now be winners of all of their contests this season?
Just about everything, honestly. It's hard to find weaknesses with this team sometimes. The biggest thing has been their defense. They, kind of similar to Tennessee, run a really, really strong full court press that just has worked against pretty much everybody they've seen. They force a ton of turnovers and they don't give up a lot. And they're just really balanced. They have a ton of different scoring options. We just saw a sophomore off the bench drop 34 on 10 made threes the other night against Xavier. On top of, your Sarah Strong and your AZ Fudd and your Blanca Quiñones, who have kind of been leading the way the whole season. They shoot really well from three. They shoot really well from the floor. They have a lot of flow. They are, I think, leading the country in assists right now. So just about everything that you can do well, UConn has done well in just about every game that they've had.
Yeah, I think the one player you're talking about, I think her name is Ali Zabel. She had 10 made threes. I think it tied a program record for UConn in made threes. I mean, what kind of growth have you seen from the sophomore player in her sophomore season?
Yeah, the young players on this team in general have all been really, really good this year. Sarah Strong obviously is a sophomore as well, but Ali is just getting a lot more opportunity this year. She, came in as a really highly rated recruit, McDonald's All-American. But you can just see the confidence difference in her this year. She's more comfortable defensively this year. And they brought in another sophomore in Kaylee Heckel coming from USC. And she's also been great, has taken that sophomore leap as well. And yeah, that young group looks really, really comfortable out there right now.
After Tennessee and UConn met by the end of the season last year, Tennessee was just one of 3 teams to hand UConn a loss. Looks a little bit different this season. How different is this UConn Huskies team compared to the last time that Tennessee met and handed them just one of a trio of losses by the end of it?
Yeah, it felt like at this time last year, they were still kind of trying to figure out who they were almost. They were still putting pieces together. They hadn't really, found that super consistent flow that I think this team has, and has just kind of allowed them to really dominate pretty much everyone they've seen. They have that one single digit win over Michigan, and other than that, everything has been 15 plus. I think we're on a streak of 16 or 17 by 25 plus right now. They just are really, really good at locking into what they do and kind of finding who's hot. Like they have so many different options. So they're really, really difficult to guard. And I think last year they were leaning a lot more heavily on Sarah and on Paige Beckers to kind of carry that. And this year it really can be anyone. There's players off the bench who are outscoring starters. There's, starters who are not scoring a ton, but are, forcing a ton of steals, up in all their other numbers. So it's just a really, really balanced team, more so than I think they've had in a really long time.
You've mentioned Sarah Strong a couple of times. Of course, she was a key player for the UConn Huskies a year ago. Had some valuable plays and minutes against the Lady Vols the last time that they met. How much has she grown in her sophomore season and really evolved her game to maybe be that key player once again in this matchup?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember Gino Auriemma said after that game last year, he thought the Tennessee game was one of her only like freshman moments of last season. And this year she was so good last year that it was hard to see her taking a huge leap. And I feel like she just, again, like is a lot more confident. She's become like more of sort of a vocal leader for them, and kind of a floor general. She's doing a lot more of the like point forward type stuff now that she's not having to play the 5 as much. And defensively, I think that's the biggest. She's really, really taken a leap there. She's always a good defender, but she's leading the country in pretty much all the defensive advanced metrics right now. She's averaging career highs in steals. She's on pace to break UConn's single season steals record for a sophomore. So yeah, she does everything well. She really is. Like, there's really so few flaws in her game, and I think it's just sort of we're seeing like an even more refined level of that this year.
Yeah, and I think you obviously just mentioning a moment ago in Paige Beckers, who has been that player for UConn that maybe has filled that role, maybe not from a production standpoint, but maybe even just from a leadership perspective. There's obviously a number of young players on this team and really just a handful of key players from last year returning. So who do you think's maybe stepped into that leadership role that would be important for this UConn team and what will be a very highly anticipated matchup on Sunday?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like they don't really have sort of that one clear voice like they had with Paige, where that was sort of the clear-cut leader of the team. I feel like we've seen it be different people in different games, in different situations. When they had that Michigan game earlier in the year, it was Azzi Fudd who kind of took over and rallied everybody and was kind of the centerpiece of reining them back in and coming away with that win. It's been Sarah a few times this year. She's again like a lot more comfortable using her voice and telling people what she sees now that she has a little bit more experience. And I think KK Arnold has been a great leader for them as well, kind of stepping into that point guard role. You could see she missed a game with a broken nose a couple weeks back, and you could tell, even though they weren't, they're playing Providence, which is not a super difficult opponent for them, but you could see just sort of the disconnect that happened not having her on the floor. So I think she's been a super important just kind of glue piece for them as well.
We're joined by Emily Adams of the Hartford Courant. Emily, when we look at this matchup for Sunday, who it will be or what will be a key component for the UConn Huskies to walk away, defend home court with a win, understanding that when the Lady Vols are on, they certainly are a team that can turn teams over. They capitalize with points, and at times they seem like they are a multi-level scoring type of team. What will it take for UConn to get back into the winning side of things?
I think defensively, I think the turnover battle is going to be big on both sides. These are two of the, better turnover forcing teams in the country, two of the better turnover margin teams in the country. So it's really strength on strength with that. It's might turn into a little bit of a track meet with both teams running the press. And so I think UConn has to be able to capitalize on those opportunities when you get the extra possessions off turnovers, to be able to force those live ball turnovers that they've been really successful with. and to turn it over less than Tennessee does. You know, you look at that game last year, they had a lot more turnovers than were typical for them. Specifically, I think Sarah had her season high in turnovers in that game. So that's the biggest thing. I think they also really need to have a good game from three. They've been in a little bit of a slump lately, kind of up and down, outside of, Allie obviously had that big night. The rest of the team collectively has not been shooting great from three. And I think they're just so much more difficult to defend when they're able to really space the floor out like that. So if they can kind of get AZ Fudd going again, if Sarah can connect from three as she's been doing in streaks this year, and if Allie can keep that hand hot, I think that will make them a really, really difficult team to beat.
And obviously you covered the Huskies on a seemingly daily basis. What would be maybe an underrated component to this team that could be a sneaky factor in this matchup Sunday afternoon?
I think their 3-point defense has been a weakness for them this year. That's kind of the one hole in their defense. And they struggle with elite guards when they get hot. It's tough to slow them down. And I think Tennessee has a few of those who can kind of light it up when they're really on. And especially coming into a game like this off of a loss like they just had, a really high stakes matchup.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me at all to see them kind of get out of sorts a little bit or see a few of those shots fall and get behind a little bit. But they've been really good this year about kind of rallying out of those sort of slump moments that they've had. So it's just kind of who can keep it hot longer.
No, truly. And this is just such an awesome rivalry. I'm so glad that they renewed it many years ago, and Tennessee being able to snap the 4-game losing streak at home last season. We'll see how it goes when Tennessee is on the road. Emily, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find your work as you get ready to preview this matchup and get ready for the game on Sunday?
Yeah, all my writing is on current.com, COURANT. And then on Twitter is where I am mostly at EA Adams 6. So yeah, that's where most of my stuff is.
Awesome. Emily, I appreciate the time and best of luck this weekend.
Well, thank you so much.
Of course. All right, so we have the Tennessee Lady Vols getting ready for their best game of the season. Number 1, UConn. Number 15, Lady Volunteers, of course, now looking to get back into the winning side of things and get back to what their strengths are, executing in the press, having good transition offense, and then executing on those three-pointers led by one of the best scorers in the SEC and their freshman point guard in Mia Paldo. But they certainly will have a test going up against UConn, who seems to be building momentum more and more every single game. Same could be said for the Tennessee Volunteers, where VFL Jerron Mayman says it's probably going to come down to communication. The late game execution could be the difference maker, and he might be right, especially when you consider the Auburn Tigers. Yeah, they're a team that can rally late. They saw that just against Texas, where they put up 54 second half points to come from behind and steal that win, to couple with a road win against the Florida Gators, now be winners of their last 4 games. So both Tennessee and the Lady Vols have a massive weekend coming up, one that could shape the outlook for what happens in March with 1 month to go until the start of the postseason. We'll have so much more on Tennessee with our post-game reports from inside Food City Center on Saturday, and many more reports coming up on the Lady Volunteers Sunday afternoon. But it's been Live Ball with Paige Dower and VFL Jerron Mayman from Harper Audi. We'll talk to you guys again this weekend.
See it behind your eyes. I'm already there, calling me home.
I have always wanted a perfect smile. Today's Smile Express is going to help me to hopefully get a perfect smile.
With the help of Smile Express, I can actually get my perfect smile within 20 weeks. Not to mention how the staff is so friendly and helpful. Here they were taking a couple pictures just to do a before and after once we're done with the process. I honestly thought it was so cool how you could actually see my teeth 3D printed on the screen. And I'll show you guys how they're expected to look once the treatment is done. I am so happy and excited to share this with you guys because Smile Express is about to give me a straight smile.